Well, thank you. I'm grateful to be here. My interest in Macrina is both personal, but it's also very pragmatic. Teaching general education, as I have for undergraduates for many years, trying to find a way into the early church when you hear comments like so many dudes, so many dates. Not dates as in, you got it, right? And trying to find
dudes.
Dates with dudes, not dates with dudes. And in a context where you may have 60% women students and 30% male students, which is the way undergraduate life works, trying to find ways to bring students into the tradition and find some enthusiasm. Macrina has been one of those gateways. So I'll speak informally, but it's more like I'm speaking to you as if you are 20-year-olds, and many of you have long and deep histories with this material. But I offer it as a way to bring one less dude into the conversation and put story forward. The kind of story that inspires a life of virtue. Because obviously in undergraduate classrooms, whether they remember the dates, they can Google them. But what we hope is that they do take up the call to follow Christ and to live a life that exemplifies the beauty of the gospel. So we are going to start in the year 327, just after the Council of Nicaea. And not too far from Nicaea, a woman named Amelia is in labor. And in her hard labor, she has a vision. And she says, after the fact, that this vision made her contractions and her pain lessen, and she fell asleep. And while she is sleeping, she dreams that she's holding her firstborn that is coming in her arms. And as she dreams of this baby, an angel appears. And the angel says to Amelia, this one, this baby, shall be named Thecla. Now, many of you know that Thecla was an early champion. Was she real? Was she not? I think she probably was. But she was an early champion, 1st century, early 2nd century, champion of women's full discipleship and public speaking. In the Acts of Paul and Thecla, we hear that Thecla heard Paul preach. She slipped away later to meet him. She threw off her engagement, much to the chagrin of her wealthy family, because she wanted to follow the way of Paul. As she moved into the public sphere, she experienced a public assault by a prominent official. That official, Alexander, sentenced her to the arena to be fed to the wild beasts. We saw a little of what that might have meant yesterday. But when Thecla was thrown to the lions, a lioness protected her. But Thecla, being Thecla, did not scoot away from the arena. She paused to pray, and then she flung herself into some sort of aquarium full of sea lions that was in the arena. Yes, and she took the opportunity to baptize herself.
So she survived or she died?
She survived. And there she proclaimed, in the name of Jesus, I baptize myself on the last day. And lightning struck. But it was the sea lions, not Thecla, that didn't make it. And in the Acts of Paul and Thecla, at this point, all the women in the arena cheered. Thecla was freed. She began to dress herself in a cloak like a man, and she joined Paul, living as an ascetic and commissioned to speak, to preach. This all was said to have happened in Iconium, modern-day Konya. You'll have to help us know where that is.
I'll find out later.
Okay. But in nearby Ephesus, in the cave of St. Paul, Paul and Thecla are depicted in frescoes that remain. I think the cave may be closed. I'm not sure you can go there now. But there is Paul, and there is Thecla, and there is Thecla's mother. Rather than a digression, the story that I tell is the backdrop that provides the expectations of who Macrina was to become. Thecla did not become Macrina's name, Macrina did. But it was, as her mother called, her secret name. We know this from her brother. I'll get to that in a minute. Macrina was born in Pontus. I understand that's up along the Black Sea, not far from Cappadocia, but along the Black Sea. And Christian converts are mentioned from Pontus at Pentecost. We know that Aquila and Priscilla, tent makers from Pontus. We know that Macrina, the elder, the one that Macrina, the younger, was actually named by, was born in about 270, was a second generation disciple of Origen, or Origen's version of Christianity, and that she and her husband suffered under persecution in the late 200s. And they are said to have spent 6 years in hiding along the shores of the Black Sea. So persecution, this way of being willing to die for Christ, of martyrdom, was not far from the imagination. Basil, who we just mentioned about, Macrina's eldest brother, she was the eldest, he was the oldest of the boys. There seem to have been 5 of them. He credits Macrina the elder as the one who shared the teaching of God with the family. And this is a family that is full of saints. I didn't know another family until you get to the Wesleys that you can start going like this.
Yeah.
The other couple of things that we know about Macrina are from texts, 3 texts that are written by her brothers, her younger brothers. The first is Basil's Rule of Life, drawn in 1356. He would have been about 26 years old. She may have been about 30 or 31. And Basil wrote that, quote, the doctrines of piety have been brought to ruin and the laws of the church thrown into confusion because of 313. What does it mean to be a Christian in this age of easy Christianity? He criticized men's ambition in the sanctioned church as the primary reason for the confusion. He encouraged local churches and families to create monasteries of a sort based on the principles of love and community, care for the poor, teaching and preaching. That this started with family, with neighbor, right where you are. And Macrina, her mother and her brother Peter, they founded what is probably one of the first double monasteries, where monks and nuns lived under the leadership of a single leader, and that leader was Macrina. She was about in her early 30s. After her father had died, she had convinced her mother Amelia and this brother Peter that they should leave and move to the country estate. This is an extremely wealthy family. And there in the country estate, they gave away their luxuries, freed their servants, and determined to live in ascetic simplicity. And they did. A few of the former maids joined them, other wealthy widows joined, Peter and a few men lived in a house nearby. Basil joined them too, briefly, before going on his own tour to learn more about monasticism in Egypt, and we heard the result of that. The next source for Macrina's life is by another brother, by Gregory of Nyssa. He wrote after Basil's death on the soul and resurrection. And in this text, he writes of his grief and his doubt, of not knowing what happens to the soul, what has happened to dear Basil. And in his despair, in the way he writes this, he turns to the ideal teacher, his big sister. And in this text, Macrina is the Socratic teacher, and Gregory is the student. And in this dialogue, he asks things like, at death, it's hard to know if the vivifying presence is anything by itself. Where is it, the soul, after death? How is it after death? Or does it exist at all? And Macrina tells him many things, but the one I'll put forward is to look to creation, where elements that are opposed to one another, things like day and night, maybe the evening star and the morning star, earth and sky, where things opposed to one another are woven together in ineffable union. Consider, she says, how the sun's rays heat the water below, which is heavier, weightier. But that weightier substance, when touched by the sun, begins to evaporate and ascend. These things work together. Yet the body and soul, while functioning together in life, the soul can be distinct. It's in essence created to animate and organize a sentient body as long as that sentient body is capable of life. It is then separated and returned to God from whence it came. My students love this document. She talks about, well, it's kind of like paint. It becomes a portrait, but you could separate out the colors if you were, say, God. The final source for Macrina is also by Gregory. The Vitae, or the life of Macrina, was written at her death when she died at about the age of 52. This Vitae, like most, is a little bit of sacred fiction. It characterizes Macrina as the ideal woman who both lives respectably while engaging in radical nonconformist discipleship, done for the sake of the gospel. Two scholars, briefly, and I will close. Two scholars assess the way Macrina's life functions in their time. Aaron Walsh says she's an exemplar of a move from the matron, Proverbs 139, we talked about that yesterday, from the matron woman to the new ideal of the ascetic virgin. The ascetic virgin is now the way, the model, the path to attain the heights of holiness. Mothers may attain a certain kind of holiness, but asceticism, virginal asceticism, now is another rung higher. A model of what Gregory calls Macrina's angelic life. And then lastly, Carla Sundberg writes in this book I have over here, The Cappadocian Mothers. She says, Macrina's life is written as the Cappadocian brothers, quote, perfect blueprint for a life of theosis. She says Gregory was establishing Macrina as the new Thecla, a new and improved role model for young Christians, a life of asceticism and complete dedication to God that can lead to transformation and ultimately to full union with God. A final fun fact. If you were 18, you love fun facts. Macrina had what Virginia Burroughs calls a tattoo, or a hidden scar above her breast. Gregory sees it when he helps prepare her body after her death. The attendant points it out, and the attendant says, "This scar is left on the body as a reminder of the great help of God." Macrina had had an infected sore that threatened to move into her bloodstream near her heart. But she refused to see a doctor. I was listening to that. I think in that debate she was on one side, right? She refused to see the doctor. And she relied on prayer, a mud poultice, and asking her mother to sign the cross over the infected area. The mark, says Virginia Burroughs, is a mirror of the soul. What has happened inside Macrina has been marked by God, both inside